Both gross accounting and the Solo model concludes that increases in total factor productivity are the most important drivers of economic growth. But we have treated the productivity term, A, as something given, exogenous. It's just there. We cannot influence it in the Solo model. Now we're trying to improve our model so that we can influence it by playing with capital and labor. Now we'll look at it as a variable, just like physical capital, labor. Technology is different from physical inputs, such as capital and labor. Physical inputs are objects. They're tangible, or at least like services, even though they're intangible, they're there. There are some things. And they are rival in their use. You can choose to go to this restaurant and eat there, or go to another restaurant and eat there and in the other one. But when it comes to technology, for example, Wi-Fi, when Wi-Fi is invented, it's a technology. You can have different providers, but you cannot like use Wi-Fi and then a different type of wireless internet connection technology. It's just there. One very good example is the invention of production line. We call Henry Ford the father of industrial engineering. Henry Ford basically, he didn't do anything. He didn't invent the car. He didn't invent the internal combustion engine. He didn't invent anything really like technical. But what he did was that he invented a way to make things work. Before Henry Ford, if you wanted to buy a car, you would have to go to an artisan, order the car. And then the artisan would go buy the tires, buy the engine, buy the transmission, and then work with a couple of workers to assemble them all together. And it would take like a couple of months until it was ready for your use. But what Henry Ford did was that he put every single worker in a line so that one worker's job was just to assemble the tire. The other one just to put on the transmission. The next one put on the engine, the doors, the windows, the windshield. After that, the windshield wiper. All of that in this one single line. This revolutionized the industry. It made United States able to outproduce every single country on Earth. This magical invention. But the thing about this invention is that it's not some kind of secret. As soon as you see it, you can copy it. It's not. It's like non-rival. Immediately after this was used, everyone else started to use the production line. Technology is a set of ideas, non-physical, that are non-rival in nature. Excludability is the ability of the owner of a piece of property to deny its use to others unless they pay for it. For example, your house, it has excludability. Not everybody can come and live in your house, but then they can pay for it, they can rent it. One of the beauties of this, what's the name of that app that people rent their houses on?
Airbnb?
Like Airbnb, yes. Airbnb is the best example of this excludability. People can live everywhere they want, but they can meet others who are willing to rent out their rooms, like a room in their house or the whole apartment, and they can pay for it and they can use it. Ideas, however, don't have that much excludability, and that is the problem. Have you ever heard about intellectual property? Like some people say that United States has this huge problem of leaking intellectual property. United States is basically the most efficient economy in the world, and all these new inventions in terms of efficiency and productivity are immediately copied by every other country on earth. And that makes the United States not to like grow as fast as it would have. If these other countries were to pay for all the things that they copy from the United States, the US economy would have been much bigger. But because this growth in technology, this growth is in technology and it's non-excludable, therefore you can't do anything about it. Non-excludability of ideas may discourage investment in technology. Why should I spend billions and billions on producing something? For example, let's say the COVID vaccine. Why did, like, how much money Pfizer spent on producing its vaccine in such a short time? Very, like, large sums of money. All those scientists, all those data scientists, all those labs, all those research, they cost money. You spend all that money so that you can sell your technologies, you can sell your invention, so you can make money from it. If as soon as the vaccine was produced, everyone else would have had the formula and like the know-how and everything, and they would have produced the same quality vaccines, there was no reason to do it. Non-excludability of ideas may discourage investment in technology. Pharmaceutical is the best example here. How to promote productivity? Productivity can be promoted by investing on infrastructure, both human infrastructure and physical infrastructure. Roads, like for example, these interstate highways, very important for productivity. Why? It's not like only people who drive on them are benefiting from them. Even people who don't drive benefit from them. How? Your Amazon, when you order something online, the truck carries it. Because those roads are really nice, multiple lane, you can go fast, you can like go 70 miles per hour on some of them. You can quickly get what you ordered. You save time. You buy your groceries from Walmart, the trucks that deliver your groceries drive on those roads. So it affects everyone, both indirectly and directly. And it would improve the efficiency and productivity of the economy. Another form of infrastructure, human infrastructure, human capital. Human capital is the knowledge and skills that workers have built up through education and training programs. For example, college education, according to pretty much every single study, if you spend time on a 4-year degree, on average, you're going to make a lot more money than people who didn't go to college. Of course, remember that this depends on what major you study, the situation of the economy, but on average, it's a fact that if you spend time on a 4-year degree, if you spend resources, if you invest on your own human capital, you're going to get a return. A recent study of large number of nations showed a positive correlation between enrollment levels in secondary school and real GDP. Educational improvements in the US labor force accounted for about 15% of real per capita GDP growth. In addition, the US government has allocated large sums into public health, which has the effect of keeping workers healthier and more productive. One thing that we don't often take into account is the economic value of health. Imagine a trucker or a farmer or a school teacher. This person works for like 30 years. The experience that he or she accumulates is priceless. There are things that no one can teach you. You just have to learn on the job through experience. And if this trucker or if this teacher or this farmer at the age of 45, because of all the pollution in the air, for example, get cancer and die, all that experience is gone. Forget about all the human aspects of health, just purely economic. Purely economic. It's profitable and it makes sense to invest on health so that you can increase the life expectancy of your labor force, so that you can make them accumulate experience and end up being more productive. In fact, I went to this conference by a Professor Muller from Carnegie Mellon University. He had this beautiful work. It's called Green GDP. What he did was that he estimated the effect of passing the Clean Air Act by the US Supreme Court and US government on United States GDP growth. After the Clean Air Act, the Clean Air Act was a set of laws that prohibited companies from polluting and things like that. It was a very like a broad set of rules and regulations to make sure that carbon emissions would go down, to prevent rising sea levels. But in effect, what they achieved by doing this, they managed this set of laws, even though they couldn't probably lower the sea levels, what they achieved was that they made the environment healthier. They brought down cancer fertility rate, mortality rates, and they saved a lot of lives with those laws. Those lives that were saved were people in their primes, farmers, engineers, doctors, truckers, teachers, all these experienced and economically active members of the society, that they could live for 10 more years. And imagine how much that 10 more years life expectancy combined with that experience that has been accumulated contributed to the US economy a lot. Governments can encourage research and development as well. Governments can spend on R&D themselves. The government can have lots of labs, research. Lots of our today's technology is probably because of the United States government research on defense. For example, I know that internet was actually a military thing. It was because of the government's spending on military research, that now we have internet. Or I read about space shuttles, even though like space programs on paper were huge waste, you just wasted tons of resources so that you go to the moon. Good for you, you went to the moon. Now what? Nothing. But in reality, all those spending on those space shuttles and those Apollo programs and all those experiments, research, they ended up helping lots of other areas. So government spending on research and development can help improving technology in a country a lot. Also, you can give tax incentives for research and development so that companies would be more encouraged to, instead of investing more on physical capital, invest more on research and development so that your companies can be more productive and more technologically effective and advanced. And of course, one of the most important ones, patents. By protecting the property rights of those who invest on research and development, by making sure that their hard work is not going to be copied by someone else and stolen by others, patents can make inventors make money, can help inventors make money from all their hard work. Give inventors the sole right to use, make, or sell licensing rights to others for a set period of time. Patents, very important. It makes, it lowers the non-excludability of technology. It makes them more like other goods, more profitable. So it makes sense to invest on them now. Of course, institutions and property rights. Institutions, there is a book by Professor Echemoglu at University of MIT, Why Nations Fail. In that book, there is a chapter, Why Nations Fail, Institutions, Institutions, Institutions. Institutions are the most important part of a society's growth, economically at least, are a set of rules, organizations, and customs that govern the behavior of individuals and firms. The most basic set of institutions that affect economic growth are property rights. Property right, according to the World Bank, the most important thing, if you want to grow your economy, you have to protect property rights. Property rights are the protection of property from expropriation by the government or non-government agents or parties. Basically means that you get to keep what's yours so that others can take it from you. Why it is so important? Imagine I'm going to college and I bring my laptop with me every day. I need my laptop to do my homework and everything else in class. When I'm going to college, on my way, someone stops me and tells me, give me your laptop. My laptop's gone. Now I no longer have a laptop. I would go and buy myself a new one, but I will not bring it to college next time because I know that that person who stands on the corner would again take it from me. So I would not bring my laptop anymore. The same exists for companies. If you open a company in some country and the government suddenly nationalizes everything you have, no one else will invest in that country. At the first sign of nationalization attempts, every business owner will escape if they can. Every company, every multinational corporation would leave. No one would stand, no one would stay so that this property can be seized. Governments, some type of governments, like for example, left-wing, like communist parties, especially in the 80s, like 70s, 60s, that period, they were really interested in like nationalization periods and like government takeovers. And when nationalizations happened without compensating those companies which were involved, everyone else fled. And this led to huge economic recessions. One example would be Cuba, also Egypt, also Iran. These countries, they all had like these nationalization projects, and they were then hurt real bad because everyone else fled. Now, property rights. People require property rights to have incentives to make investments. This was the, like what I told you, was the most basic form of property rights. It also means how effective a government is in settling disputes and protecting people's property rights. For example, if two companies sign a contract with each other, and then there is a disagreement on who gets to pay what to the other, one of them sues the other one, how fast the legal system responds is very important. That's property right. If someone owes me money and he or she refuses to pay, I would sue that person. And if the court tells me come back in 5 years, my property is gone, my money is gone. That would hurt investment. Fast and effective court system, effective law enforcement. If someone wants to, I don't know, like take my stuff, I call the cops. If they arrive in 30 minutes, if they arrive in 3 hours, not good. These are all what affects property rights in today's world. We no longer have like many communist parties nationalizing the stuff. Even left-wing parties nowadays, they understand the importance of private enterprise. Instead, they try to increase taxes on companies. So instead of just taking their stuff right away, they indirectly take their stuff and then they distribute it amongst the poor. Wealth distribution. This, yeah. Legal system and property rights. Strong property rights are established through an effective legal system, ability to enforce contracts. If your legal system is not efficient, your economy will suffer. Adequate resources, courts and judges. There must be enough judges so that you won't have to stand in line for like 5 years. Like one of the reasons that the Iranian economy was hurt real bad in terms of investment was that the court system is overloaded. The court system is not able to settle disputes in time. Like I used to work for this company and my boss, someone owed him money, some other company owed us money. And basically, I wanted to talk to them and like, can you please pay us back the money? And like, what we understand is that if you owe someone's money, you have to be nice to that person. You have to respect them. In Iran, it's the opposite. If someone owes you money, you have to be very kind, very respectful. how are you doing? Please, is it possible that you can at least give some of my money back? Why? Because if that person doesn't like you, he'll just tell you to go sue me. Say goodbye to the money 5 years from now. After 5 years, you will appear before a judge, and then the judge, if that person just says, I don't have the money, the judge will just tell him to pay him back in like 200 installments. You just have to say goodbye to that money. And all the time, inflation is removing the value of that money. So that's a huge problem. In fact, I read the statistics that the number of court cases in the country, in my country right now, it's around 50% of the population. So on average, half the country sued the other half. In reality, some people have been sued like 200, 300 times, but it's very funny because the court system is so overloaded. We have like 30 million or 40 million open cases right now in the legal system. It's overloaded. And that is bad. You want the legal system to be very efficient, to quickly solve disputes and move on to the next case, move on to the next case. For that, you need adequate resources. Enough funding for courts, judges, law enforcement, detectives, and experts that can quickly give proper analysis to the judge so that the judge can take a look at it and say, okay, you pay him or he pays you. And access to lawyers, of course. Now, I am no lawyer, so about different types of legal systems, I just read this and I looked it up online. I have no idea anything about law, common law or Napoleonic law. So I'm just going to do you a favor and pass this slide. The only thing I know is that I should be nice to people. I know traffic laws and also that you should be nice to people. That's my utmost understanding of law. So just be nice to people and you'll be fine probably. Now, geography, legal system, and economic growth. How colonies were settled explains why even countries with legal systems based on the British law have different economic performance. Some colonies, for example, Jamaica, India, and Nigeria, could not be settled by large numbers of Europeans due to high death rates from native diseases. Their small fractions of population resulted in less effective legal systems to protect the property rights of the average person. And so those countries have remained poor. On the contrary, in the United States, settlers arrived in large numbers and they brought with them the British law, the tradition of respecting property rights, and this enabled these countries' economies to grow. Now, obstacles to effective property rights. What makes property rights disappear or at least hurt? Corruption. Corruption is one of the most obstacles for investment, especially in poor countries. If the government can't fight corruption, investment, it would become so expensive that it wouldn't be profitable anymore. Imagine this. Let's say you're a businessman or a businesswoman. You want to go and open a business or invest in a country, in country X. You arrive at the airport. I have seen this myself in another country. I was working with this person and he traveled to another country to open a business. At the airport, this tiny country, at the airport, they held him. The cops will just hold him, like his bag and stuff. Like, give me 300 of the country's currency and I'll give you your stuff. 300. Then on the road, traffic police stopped him for no reason. Yep, just give me 200. I don't want to argue with you. Just give me 200 and you can go. 200. Up till now, 500, the local currency. That is calculated as costs to your investment. You still haven't invested anything and you already down 500. All the way, this corruption makes things especially difficult, like not profitable. So corruption is the worst thing. It's like the worst thing ever. Although there is something that I mean, it's probably not true all the time, but corruption sometimes can be good when you're trying to do business in these environments with bureaucracy is just strangling everyone. Like you want to get a signature from this department, go to that department, get a signature. You have to spend time. The value of your time, very high. You have to, like, in some countries, if you want to start a project or start a business, you have to wait for months. Now, imagine the costs as inflicted on your capital for sitting there doing nothing for months, on your own time, the opportunity cost as a business person, the opportunity cost of your time going from this office to that office. You could be making money somewhere else. Sometimes, very rare cases, it is better if you can just pay someone off and be done with it. Just here, take my money. Like I've seen this myself, that sometimes some business men, they just pay some money. It's like, here, take this money. I don't want to deal with your bureaucratic nightmare. But 99.9% of times, corruption destroys all incentives for investment because it will increase costs. You would just pay more and more and more. High costs of establishing legal businesses. If you cannot easily become a lawyer or you cannot easily get into legal business, this would cause inefficient legal systems. So you want to have a low cost, low entry cost for lawyers so that the country can have enough lawyers. And of course, the grabbing hand. When governments look at businesses as someone that they can take money from. This is just, it basically tells people, please don't do business in our country. We don't like money. We hate money. Please go away. That's the effect of the grabbing hand. They use this term, these two scientists, to describe the behavior of governments that steal from their own citizens in various ways. For example, in Zimbabwe, the government suddenly came up with this idea that because of the past problems, now some people's farms should be nationalized and taken by the government so that they can help others. As soon as this happened, the whole economy broke apart. People were trying to sell their farms before it can be nationalized and taken over by the government. Price fell. All those experienced farmers and efficient farmers, they left. Their farms were taken. Agricultural production fell hugely, sharply. Everything was just not good. So the grabbing hand is when the government tries to take money from its own citizens by coming, instead of taxing them like a responsible government does, instead of just taxing them and take their money to fund its projects, they come up with innovative ways to technically steal from their people. This would scare away all potential investors. So, grabbing hand, basically a form of corruption, bad for property rights. Policy and practice. The World Bank's doing business. In 2003, the World Bank began to publish an annual report, Doing Business, which provides measures of how easy it is to conduct business in different countries. Low doing business rankings have led governments in countries such as Colombia and Egypt to revamp the process of setting up businesses and make it easier to enforce contracts. If you're not doing well on that ranking, potential investors wouldn't think about coming to your country. They look at things like, is the country safe? Law enforcements, are they effective? Legal system, is it efficient? Is it not corrupt? Can you easily find a lawyer that can represent you even if you're not in the country yourself? All of these. And if you have a high ranking on doing business, investors will arrive in your country because they know they will not meet corruption, and also they will not be strangled in all these bureaucratic mazes that can never end. Like, you get the signature from this office, go to the next office, get a signature from that one. They will never end if the country is a low ranking doing business. Now, any questions? All good? Great. Foreign aid. This is a very important thing. Like it's a double-edged sword. Can foreign aid lift countries like in Africa out of poverty? Yes and no. On one hand, many economists argue that foreign aid encourages governments to act as a grabbing hand or remove incentives to develop policies that promote economic growth. If they're giving you free money because your country is poor, you're probably likely would try to keep the country poor so that you can enjoy the free money as a politician, a government. On the other hand, free money is basically money that, like, the United States just paid this country $5 billion. That money doesn't have any advocate. There is no one that would sue you if something happened to, let's say, $100 million of that 5 billion. It's just, no one would notice. Just take the 100 million and build yourself a golden statue. Who cares? This is a problem with foreign aid. Also, foreign aid sometimes distorts market. For example, on my own research, with my boss, we worked on foreign agricultural aids, foreign food, U.S. food program. United States have had this extensive, very generous policy of delivering free food, at least free crops to poor countries, like grain, tons and tons of grain, just dump it in some poor country. And this helped a lot of people out of hunger. In countries where food prices are high and people are so poor, we could be seeing it, starvation or famine. But because of the USA food programs, free food was made available to public. But this is not always good. In the long term, that free food would crash the price of agricultural products, and it would make farmers in those countries hurt. Imagine if you're a farmer, you're planting grains and you're expecting to make a lot of profit at the end of the year from your harvest. But suddenly this huge American ship arrives and dumps tons and tons of free grain in the city. Who would buy your crops? No one. We all have that free American grain. No one would pay you for your crop, and then you would go bankrupt. Then you would leave your business. And if the US food program stops, then starvation happens. Therefore, the country would be addicted to the US food aid. Even though, for example, US food aid was just helping like 5% of the population. Now, because of that distortion in the market, now 50% depend on it. So the country is basically addicted to that food aid now. They can't survive without it because all the farmers were pushed out of business. And this especially holds true if you consider that US farmers receive huge subsidies. So basically, the US government pays these farmers so that their product would be much cheaper than a farmer that doesn't have generous subsidies like American farmers. And even then, the US government would again buy those crops. That's a double subsidy. Buys the same crops that the government itself subsidizes, dump it in some other country as food aid program. This argument is too complicated for like 15 minutes of discussion here. But yeah, food aid, double-edged sword. Every type of foreign aid, just a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can hurt. On the other hand, of course, the obvious benefits. Some foreign aid, particularly in form of public health measures that lead to improvements in health and life expectancy, has been productive. Go ahead, Prem.
I was gonna say, have you heard of book Dead Aid from Dambisa Moyo?
Have I heard about what?
The book Dead Aid from Dambisa Moyo. It's basically talking about foreign aid, and basically it's I don't know if you know this, but there's some countries in like Africa that international aid constitutes like 70% of their government budget and stuff. So it's kind of crazy to see that, like you know, how much of a role that foreign aid plays in some of the countries that are actually out there. And it's like exactly for the reason that you said, that a lot of economists argue that it doesn't promote economic growth, which is kind of what happens, because I think there's only a couple countries where like they outright refuse foreign aid, and I think that one of them is Eritrea. And basically what they do is they say that like not even the government officials, they just get like the basic amenities and stuff. Everything else they have to pay out of pocket for. But in a lot of countries, like the government officials end up getting like all these kind of crazy fancy things.
Yep.
National aid. So
national foreign aid programs, they're like they're too complicated. Like on paper, you have these government, like these rich countries that are helping the poor countries. But in reality, like in agriculture, which is my own research, in reality, these rich countries are at first distorting the market by subsidizing their farmers. And then through food aid programs and foreign aid programs, they're bribing the poor countries not to sue them. For example, in the United States, you have this law which is called planting restrictions. This is a very like a tiny clause in the agricultural policy of the country that basically says if you're if you plant fruits and vegetables, you will not be receiving direct cash payments. Or in other words, farmers don't plant vegetables. Let the vegetable growers in Florida and in California do that. In the Sun Belt states, you shouldn't plant vegetables. That's the very definition of the market distorting. And in fact, Brazilians took United States to court, WTO's court, and they won. They actually proved that this is market distorting, then this is cheating. And it has like a huge effect, like tremendous effect on the economic growth of poor countries. If you keep subsidizing your farmers, the poor countries, which have to rely on agriculture to grow their economy and then move towards industrialization, they can never pass that point. Because they can never compete with the rich country's farmer. The rich country's farmer, for example, American farmers, they're not only the most efficient one, they're not only more educated, more technologically superior, they have nicer, fancier stuff, but also they're receiving huge sums of money from the biggest government in the world. Your government can never even think about paying you subsidies like that. So on paper, yes, economists say that foreign aid is bad. These countries are, these poor countries are being addicted to it. But if you go deeper into that whole mess, you'll see that everybody is addicted to this. Like not only poor countries are getting addicted to this foreign aid, rich countries are also addicted to pay this foreign aid, because if they don't pay that, they may end up on WTO's court for their own practices. I'm only talking about agriculture, of course, here, because that's like my own area of research. I don't know about like others.
I was gonna ask, is like, so is like a consulting business kind of grown out of like, has a consulting business kind of grown out of the fact that because a lot of this stuff is so difficult to understand, like maybe it's so complicated because there's a lot of laws surrounding it. Like I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is like with health regulation being kind of a really profitable line of work, is if you go into some kind of like basically if you do health regulation consulting, you can make a lot of money doing health regulation consulting, because there's so much kind of bloatware with you know, after like even at, like especially after the passage of Obamacare. Like one of the interesting things that I heard was like they basically banned, if you've ever heard of health status insurance. Health status insurance basically says that like,
I don't know anything about American healthcare. It's too complicated for me. I just try not to get sick.
But basically it's really interesting. They banned it where it's like, if you could basically end up paying like a fixed amount for the entirety of your life, like term insurance, with health status insurance, which basically just says, we'll kind of look at your condition whenever you first bought the policy. And anyway, I don't want to get all into it because I don't want to draw too much from time, but like it's really kind of complicated. So I was wondering if kind of what you thought about if there's a lot of consulting built into the foreign aid or agricultural practice.
I don't know about that. Like consulting, that's a whole different matter. And also this stuff gets political. So if you're like my friend, if you're my friend, I will let you do what you're doing. If you're not my friend, I will scream about it. So I really don't know.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Too complicated. Yep. Okay. All this we talked about, how to improve efficiency and total factor productivity. Now we want to introduce a set of tools that we can explain this, improving legal system, building roads, fighting corruptions, having good detectives, having good judges, having smart lawyers, all of that, having good scientists, good researchers, good PhD students, all of that. How can that create economic growth? Endogenous growth theory. Up till now, we treated efficiency, total factor productivity, as something exogenous. It is given, it's just there. Now we're trying to be more mature. We're trying to understand that total factor productivity is created within the system. It's not something that's just there. It doesn't have anything to do with the situation that was given to us. It's created by us. It's endogenous. It's created inside the system. This endogenous growth theory explains why advances in technology endogenously fuel sustained economic growth. The models are also called as Romer models, after Paul Romer, a famous economist. Romer model divides your labor force. This is the main difference between the Solow model and the Romer model. Romer divides the labor force basically into two parts: the producers and just the efficiency part. Part of your labor are those who are building things, your farmers, your truckers, at least they're providing a service, your engineers, your doctors, they're providing healthcare, they're doing something, they're useful. The other part are labors that just produce research and development, like me. Like, I'm kind of both. When I'm teaching, I'm providing a service, I'm doing something real. When I'm doing research, I'm not producing anything. I'm not producing any tangible goods or like, here, I made this. No. What a researcher does is to produce research and development. Same as a lawyer. A lawyer doesn't produce anything. That lawyer produces efficiency, produces productivity. So you divide your labor force in two parts. One part, producers, the other one, total factor productivity, or A. That would be your total population. So one more time, you would divide your total population into two parts: the parts that are active in producing goods and services, and the other part, they're active in producing productivity. They're not producing anything, but they're helping those that produce things to be more effective, to produce more things. Assume that the fraction of the population devoted to research and development is alpha. The amounts of labor devoted to producing R&D and goods and services are therefore, this is alpha, is the rate remember the saving rate. We talked about how much of your money you save. The saving rate of your total output would be your savings, saving rate multiplied by your output. Here we have the alpha, which is the rate at which your total population would become scientists, lawyers, and not go into business and produce things, become productivity labor force. this rate, this is total population, and this is a part of your labor that produces productivity. And of course, N bar would be equal to LA plus LP. LP, labor that produces things. If you change this, substitute these two, you would have N bar equal alpha N bar plus LP. Therefore, your LP would be equal to one minus alpha N bar. Make sense? So your LP is 1 minus the rate of folks who would go to produce productivity multiplied by population. These are the folks that go to produce goods and services. Your production function in this model is again is the same as the Solow model, but very different now in this sense. A is no longer a constant. Your A changes over time, because labor in the above equation is only the subset of labor devoted to producing goods and services, of course, also. Another difference, your L here is only the L that produces things. Two very important differences. First of all, your A is no longer constant, it changes. Second of all, your L would not be your total population. This is the production function. Your L is only the part of the population that produces things. Your other part, your researchers, your scientists, your lawyers, your judges, all the productivity part are here, are inside A. They are the ones that making A change. Does it make sense? Did you understand why there is no L total here or N bar here? It's LP. This is a production function. We want to understand how much goods and services we are producing. Therefore, our labor force in this function are the labor force that is producing goods and services. People like me, we're not producing anything. That trucker who lives across my street, for example, he is producing things. He is making the stuff. Therefore, he is in the production function. I am not, because I'm a researcher. My only job is to increase A. And here we also have output per worker. This is output per production worker again. When you talk about output per worker, you don't count your researchers, you don't count your lawyers, you don't count the judges. You count your producers, your factory workers, your mechanics, your pilots, your doctors, all of them. Those that are actually producing goods and services. Capital per worker, the same. But then you may ask, okay, so why do we need labor that produces technology? It's because here. Assume the increase in technology is proportional LA, so that the production function of for technology is this. Where X indicates how productive labor is in producing ideas. Excuse me. Basically, every period your technology, your productivity, your total factor productivity would increase by this much. This is your beginning amount. This is the stock of technology that you had. These are all those scientists, all those lawyers, all those, I wouldn't say bureaucrats, all those people who try to make the country more efficient so that businesses can work, court cases can be solved, newer technologies can be available, new phone, probably a mug that works with Bluetooth can be invented, things like that. And this X, this represents how efficient they are. In some countries, the same number of scientists are more effective than other countries. These scientists, they have better tools, they have more experience, they have better rules and regulations that will help them be more efficient. This X represents the efficiency of those who produce efficiency. How productive your labor is in producing ideas. Now, because technology is non-rivalrous, is that a real word? Your technology AT is producing more technology. So basically, if you produce something, then next period you will use what you produced to produce even more. And then all of this would apply to all your physical capital and all your labor, which would cause more and more output. Incorporating non-rivalry into our economic model allows us to explain sustained growth in per capita income. Without it, as in the Solow model, diminishing returns to capital eventually lead output per capita to rest at a steady state without growth. Difference between Romer model and Solow model. Solow model has a steady state. In that steady state, the economy will just sit, no more growth. In the Romer model, you will grow and grow and grow forever. Remember when we talked about Solow, we said that Solow does a poor job of explaining why the US economy kept growing, even though the capital amount is very high and saving rate dropped. Why did the US economy kept growing and growing? Because of non-rivalry of technology. Technology doesn't have diminishing returns. Technology, the more you buy it, the more you get. It's not like capital or labor that the more you buy, the less you get. It's the more you buy, you will still get a lot. Therefore, you would continue to grow and grow and grow. The reason we have a steady state is because both capital and labor, they have a curve like this. They would gradually yield you less. Until you will be here. This is the steady state. The more you invest, the more you hire people, nothing will change because of the diminishing return. But technology doesn't have diminishing return. It just keeps growing and growing. This is why the US economy kept growing, because of technology. The production function in terms of the growth rate of technology, GA, is this. This is the efficiency rate, and alpha n bar is basically your population that are involved in producing productivity. Now, this is, I think it's enough for today. Tomorrow we'll talk about this, the difference between Solo's steadiest state and the roamer's end game. What happens in the roamer? Any questions? If no questions, you can go. See you tomorrow. If there's any questions, I can stay. I still have to grade your midterm exams and your homeworks, so I owe you those. If you have any questions.